Hi everyone, and welcome to part 4 of How to Write a Book, Making the Outline. This is what I call getting the skeleton of your book down. Now, I mentioned in the first video in this series that my technique is very much more on the plotting side of the coin than the writing by the seat of your pants side. I'm not saying that my way is the right way. There are as many different methods as there are writers. However, if you are struggling to finish your book, or you find that you keep writing yourself into corners, I strongly encourage you to give this method a go because it might solve your problems. Plotting doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice your creativity for structure. It's more about letting your creativity happen and getting all those cool ideas down in a short note form rather than in whole chapters. In this video, I'm going to show you what I mean by that. First things first, I use a program called Scrivener. It's not expensive, it's easy to use, and it makes compiling for publication extremely easy. I can't recommend it enough, but that doesn't mean that you can't do the same process in any other program or even on paper. I've got an example of a Scrivener document here, and you can see it gives you a pretend corkboard with little cards stuck on it. This is much like the real boards and index cards that many people use, only in digital form. Alright, with that introduction out of the way, let's get to the meat of this video, outlining. This is where you plan your story from start to finish. Don't get me wrong, things will happen as you write that you didn't expect, and that's okay. But to avoid writing yourself into a corner, you really need to have a plan, a way to get your characters from the start of the book to the end. So each of these index cards represents a scene or chapter, depending on your writing style. For me, scenes and chapters are the same thing. So on this card, you're going to write a short title which will give you at a glance what the chapter is about. For example, if I was plotting a story, the first chapter is usually called Introduction or something similar. The outline I'm going to show you today is for a science fiction novella I wrote recently. In the first chapter, I wanted to introduce a new planet to both the characters and the reader. So I put in the title there, Introduction to New Planet. Now, underneath the title, you want to jot down the key things that happen in that chapter. This should include key action steps, that's what happens in the chapter, but it should also include other things too. For example, if there are important or cool bits of dialogue you want to include, or if there is something about the character you want to reveal, then you should jot that down too. For example, if you want to show that the character is a bad person, then you might jot down, have character kick dog. You also want to note down as many senses as you can. I've been lazy here and only included sight and smell, but when you're starting and a beginner writer, it's a really good practice to try and note down something for every single sense, for every single chapter. Now that doesn't mean that when you actually write your chapter that you'll have a paragraph that reads something like, it was a dirty building, it sounded like a busy street, it smelled like dust. It was hot. The wall tasted like mold. Because that's terrible writing. But the thing is, most new writers will overly rely on one sense, usually sight. And actually, a lot more can be conveyed using other senses. So you should always try to include things other than visual clues to make your scene come alive. Compare Nova saw a green planet to Nova drew a deep breath and the earthy scent of fresh rain rushed through her. You will see in my example that I haven't included full sentences in my notes. I've just noted down a few key points that I want covered in the chapter. Once you've finished your first chapter, you go on to the next. Again, I've been lazy in this example, but I strongly encourage you to note down all the key things that are important for you to show in each chapter. Okay, this is the real outline for the novella I wrote. Warning, this may contain spoilers for the novella Defender. It's a Patreon-only story, so if you would like to read it, just head on over to Patreon. You can join for as little as $1 a month, and it means that you can pick my brain directly, or just chat if you'd like. Okay, sorry, sales pitch out of the way. So here is the complete outline for the novella. Usually when I first start writing something, I will have a rough idea of how long I think it will be. This novella, for example, I figured would end up being between 10 and 15,000 words. My chapters are usually between 1 and 2,000, so I knew that I would have about 12 chapters. I then went through chapter by chapter and jotted down what I wanted to happen in each, along with details on the other characters, senses, and everything that I mentioned above. Ignore these last two cards, they represent a thank you note to my readers. Now obviously, this is a novella, so it's quite short. If you're planning on writing a full-length novel, that might be anywhere from 60 to 200,000 words, depending on your genre. So you'll have many more index cards. Give yourself time to fill this out, but don't be lazy. I usually find I have enough from my mind map to fill out about half the cards I need for a novel. But then as I fill out cards, I think of other things that have to happen. For example, if we take the stranded spaceship that we talked about in part 2, mind mapping, one of the conflicts was running out of food. If you were to do that as index cards, you might have one index card about a character discovering that they're out of food with all the feelings and conflicts that go with that. Then the next card will be about what the rest of the crew do when they find out. Is there panic, for example? Then the next card will be about the captain deciding on how to handle the situation and initiating a plan. And then the next chapter will be of the relevant people enacting the plan, and so on. We have about 5 chapters plotted out already. In Scrivener, you can see it arranges each of the cards on the left-hand side, using the title of the card as the name. This is why it's good to give your card a title that you will recognize, so you can quickly jump to the chapter that you want to see. If you click on one of these, it takes you to that chapter. You can see on the right-hand side it's got the full description that you wrote on the card, and you can edit that in this view too. And then most of the window is filled with the actual text of the chapter. Obviously, if you're just starting, then that would be blank. The other thing I wanted to highlight in Scrivener is that in this view you have this section called Project Notes, and you can jot down things here as well. I usually use this bit to record ideas that I have while I'm writing. You may remember in episode 1, I said never stop, never go back. I said that if you think of something as you're writing, then to just note it down and keep going. That's exactly what I use this section for. Cool ideas, missing bits of foreshadowing, or more often than I would like to admit, my characters miraculously heal from an injury. So I just make a little note there that I have to fix that when I come back to the editing stage. Once you've filled in all the cards you can, I recommend you sleep on it. This will give your brain time to think about the little story elements you've written down. You'll probably find that you think of some more chapters. I strongly encourage you to make sure you fill in the steps between your major plot points. Having an index card that says captured by raiders and the next one says save the princess, well, that's a lot of missing story in between. Take the time to fill in that gap now while you're only using index cards rather than trying to do it with full-length chapters. Trust me, it will save you hours and hours of work. Good luck. Let me know how you go with making your index cards. I'd love to see what you come up with, especially if you end up doing it by hand. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you know when the next episode comes out, where we will be looking at actually writing a chapter with a live example from me. Thank you, and see you next time.